Hey guys, so this is chapter 4 for fundamentals, and this is legal and ethical aspects of nursing. So let's get right to it. Okay, so what are laws? They are written rules that tell us how we're supposed to behave. They govern our conduct, and they're enforced by the police, right? By an authority. Now, ethics, on the other hand, are more philosophical. They look at, moral principles, what's right, what's wrong, that type of thing. And your responsibility as nurses is to know legal and ethical standards before you take care of clients. Okay. So you're held responsible for maintaining these standards of care, we call them. Okay. What I want you to know is I want you to know about the Nurse Practice Act, nursing standards and nursing licensure, clients' rights and responsibilities, nursing obligations like informed consent, protecting people's rights, upholding privacy standards like HIPAA. We'll talk about documentation, and we're going to talk about ethical issues. Okay. So what's a crime? A crime is when you commit an infraction against a person or a property. You violate the law. A felony is a serious crime, and a misdemeanor is still a crime, but not quite as serious. Okay. Liability is like accountability, responsibility for your actions. It can even be failure to act appropriately. So you can be liable because of something you did, or you can be liable because of something you didn't do. Negligence is about when someone is hurt because of something that you did not do. Okay, make sure you know that. Tort. So tort is the law that covers injuries that occurred because somebody else screwed up. Somebody else either intentionally or unintentionally did something wrong or failed to do something. So some examples of tort law. There's malpractice. Malpractice is where somebody, a doctor, a hospital, or a group of healthcare providers did something wrong that hurt another person or didn't act when they should have. So all of these can be an action or a failure to do something, okay, that caused injury to a person. Make sure you know this. Assault and battery. Assault is a threat to do bodily harm. Battery is the actual touching another person, physical contact. So if I threaten you, that is assault. If I actually put my hands on you, that is battery. Okay. Consent. This is super important. So consent for care. We should always be able to give our own consent if we are awake, alert, and oriented. If we are not, then either a parent, a guardian, next of kin, healthcare surrogate, one of those would give consent for us. If there's an emergency, and an emergency means emergent is life or death. Patient comes into the emergency room, and if we don't do surgery on them, they will die. They have given us implied consent. So in an emergency situation, we don't need a signed consent form. The consent is just implied. It's there. Okay. So we can do whatever we need to do to save your life. Okay. Urgent is different than emergent. Urgent means that something has to be done within 24 to 72 hours. So it's got to be done, but it's not life threatening right this minute. Okay. We need consent for that. Here's an example. A resident in a nursing home falls and breaks a hip, and they bring her to the hospital, and she needs surgery to repair the hip. Her next of kin and her healthcare surrogate is her daughter, who lives out of state. Well, we need consent. So we have to get a hold of the daughter that lives out of state by phone, and it requires 2 licensed personnel on the phone to obtain verbal consent. So that means the nurse and the doctor and a physical therapist, 2 licensed people. So it can't be the janitor, can't be an aide, right? 2 licensed people to get consent. That's when something is urgent, but not emergent. And when we talk about implied consent, if you tell a patient, listen, I'm going to be taking your blood pressure, and they stick their arm out, offer you their arm, that's implied consent, even if they don't say anything. By offering you their arm, they're basically telling you, yes, go ahead, take my blood pressure. Okay. Now, informed consent. Whenever a procedure or certain tests, things that are invasive, are going to be done, the physician or the surgeon needs to, on paper, it's called informed consent, explain to the patient what the procedure is, what possible complications there may be if they have the procedure or the test, including death, what alternatives there are to them having that procedure, and if there's the possibility of medical management instead of having the test or having the procedure done. So all of that has to be explained to the patient. They may ask the nurse to witness the informed consent. What you are witnessing is, and make sure you know this, okay? When you witness an informed consent, you're simply witnessing that the patient is awake, alert, and oriented. They're not under duress. In other words, nobody is forcing them to do this. They are not cognitively impaired, and they are not sedated. Okay? That's what you're witnessing, those things about that patient. Okay? And that's it. The patient has questions about the treatment, the test, the procedure, anything, you have to get the doctor to come back and explain that again. All you're witnessing when you witness that informed consent is that the patient is able to sign that form free and clear without any duress. Nobody's forcing them. They're not confused. They're not impaired. They're not drugged up. Okay, make sure you know that. That's a board question. Okay. So other legal terms that you need to know: false imprisonment or restraints. False imprisonment can also be solitary confinement, and restraints can be physical or chemical. You need to know this. So we only use restraints as a last resort, that we have to document and prove that we've tried everything else, and this is the only thing that we have left to do: physical restraints, wrist restraints, a lap buddy, right? To protect a patient from either hurting themselves or hurting the staff or hurting other people, patients. Chemical restraints are administering a medication to simply control behavior, not because the patient needs the medication. So again, we need complete and full documentation that we've tried everything else and nothing else is working and the patient is a danger to themselves or others. If physical restraints are used, the doctor has to be there to physically write the order. Make sure you know this. The order is good for 24 hours. That's it. You as the nurse have to do circ checks, circulation checks, neurovascular checks on the client every 15 minutes. The entire time that the restraints are on. Every 2 hours, the restraints have to be released, right? So like breathing room, and you have to explain to the patient why they're being restrained. So make sure you know that, okay? Then we have libel, slander, and defamation, okay? If I write something, like if I post on Facebook, oh, that woman's a hoe, the beauty parlor, the woman that owns that beauty parlor, anything that you write, or even if you post a photo that is false and can damage someone's reputation, that is libel. Slander is when you make statements that are false. Now, if you went to the beauty salon and they burned your hair or your head, and you go on and you write a review saying, that beauty salon's the worst, they burned my head. Well, that's true, right? So that's not considered libel, okay? You'd have to be writing something that is false for it to be libel, or saying something that is false for it to be slander. And both of those are forms of defamation or defamation of character, which means they harm a person's reputation or good name. So make sure you know that. Okay. Abandonment of care. So that is a sticky, sticky subject. If you are in the middle of a shift in a facility that provides 24-hour care to people and you just walk out, without reason or warning or anything, that can be deemed abandonment. And then your license can be either suspended or so disciplinary action could be taken. If you get to work and they tell you, oh, we had some call outs, so now you've got to take cart for hall A and cart for hall B. Before you take report, if you say, no, that's not safe, I'm not doing it, that's not abandonment. Okay, remember that. Invasion of privacy and confidentiality. So remember, with HIPAA laws, all patients expect that their property that they brought with them will be left alone. And all of their information needs to be kept confidential, right? Social security numbers, dates of birth, all that stuff that's in their private protected health information, PHI, cannot be shared. It's given on a need to know basis only. Okay. So if you're providing care to that person, then you need to know. If you're not, you don't need to know. Okay. Is the following statement true or false? It's acceptable to give an injection to clients if they refuse without their written consent. No. Nope, nope, nope. That's you need consent. Okay. HIPAA. So HIPAA is federal law that protects information. Okay. And like I said, I have highlighted here, need to know. It covers all the patient's private information, health information, everything. And that's only shared on a need to know basis. So it can be shared with the insurance company that's reimbursing because they need to know, physicians, nurses that are caring for the patient, but not anybody else. Okay. And it's a big penalty if you violate HIPAA. Okay. So you work in a hospital and a movie star gets admitted and you're curious. So you go on the EMR to find out, ooh, what are they in for? Let me tell you, that is a huge penalty and you can be fired for that. So don't do it. And everyone signs a HIPAA statement when they get admitted to a facility. Okay. It's so important to protect information. When you are at work, you have to make sure that no one can hear you if you're talking to another healthcare provider about a patient. Always protect your computer screen. Don't let anybody be standing over your shoulder looking. When you're done charting, log off. Never share your password. Always protect the client's confidentiality. Okay. And is the following statement true or false? It's vitally important for the nurse to ask permission from the client each time someone asks for information about the client's condition. No. So we can't make it a habit of the phone rings and it's one child that wants info and we go ask the client, can I talk to your daughter? The phone rings again, it's a son. The phone rings again, it's their neighbor. No. The way it works, the patient signs a release of information form or their guardian does, and it specifies who we are permitted to speak to. And typically with hospitals, they'll give those people a PIN number so that when they call, they'll just say, oh, here's my PIN, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we know that they are allowed to have information about the patient. Okay. Okay. What regulates our practice as nurses? It's called the Nurse Practice Act. And these are laws. These are actually statutes that define what is nursing and what do nurses do. And there's one for every state. Okay, New Jersey has one. So that determines our practice. The State Board of Nursing, for every state has a Board of Nursing, okay? They are the ones that enforce the Nurse Practice Act. They are the ones that oversee licensing for nurses. Now we have compact or multi-state licenses. So you could get a license in the state of New Jersey, but get a multi-state license, and that would give you 43 states that you would be able to work in. And I included in the PowerPoint the 43 states that are currently involved and participate in the compact license. There are a couple states that are pending, a couple states that said we don't want to be part of it. So there's your map that explains that. So the Nurse Practice Acts, what do they say? They define nursing. So practical nurses, registered nurses, and advanced practice nurses. And they tell us, what can we do? What can't we do? They also give us the requirements for schools of nursing, requirements for licensure, processes and procedures for becoming licensed, maintaining licensure, continuing education, and disciplinary action if applicable. Okay. Just because someone says LPNs can't do IVs, I'll use that as an example. The Board of Nursing in New Jersey does not say that. Now, a facility may limit the function of nurses. So they may have their own policy that says, hey, we don't let LPNs do IVs. But that's not part of the Nurse Practice Act, okay? If you're unsure, you need to ask, look at the policy and procedure manual for the facility that you work at. If there's an error, you must report it. And also, if there's any defective equipment being used, report that immediately too. So why can the Board of Nursing take your license away? Drug or alcohol abuse. Although there is an impaired nurses program in New Jersey called the RAMP program that will, allow you to seek help for your problem and you won't lose your license. Medicare or Medicaid fraud, that goes to the Office of the Inspector General. That is very, very bad, and you will lose your license. If you already did something like that, you won't get a license. Deceptive practices, that's a very vague term. There are certain things like, child abuse, elder abuse, that will preclude you from getting a license, right? Misdemeanors, you just have to write an explanation for the most part. But anything, felonies or any of the things that I spoke of, they are big deals. So you may not get a license if you've been, committed or found guilty of participating in child pornography or something like that. Okay. So how do you get a license? Well, first thing you have to do, you have to graduate the program and you have to pass your NCLEX. Okay. If you pass your NCLEX in this state and you want to get a license in another state, you can do the multi-state thing, or via reciprocity, you can get a license in another state just by saying, hey, I have a New Jersey license, I'd like a Florida license. And that's reciprocity. You would still have to pay the fee, whatever the fee was for that state, and you would still have to, maintain your continuing education credits. In the state of New Jersey, you are required to have 12 CEUs per year. Okay. Let's see. Common sense, right? Common sense. Everything that you do can have either a positive or a negative impact on people. So when in doubt, look it up. Don't ever give a med without looking it up. Be competent. Question everything. Document objectively. No opinions, right? Don't give legal advice to clients, please. And don't accept gifts. If somebody tries to hand you money, don't do that. Okay. Sometimes a state will require people that are licensed to provide emergency care. For example, Florida. I have a Florida license. When there's a hurricane, when we get our license, we agree that if there's a hurricane and they need our help, that we will help them. So some states require that. The Good Samaritan Act, that protects you from being sued if you are providing care to somebody in a reasonable and prudent manner. In other words, you're walking down the street, someone's on the ground. You get down there, you check, they have no pulse, they have no breathing, you start CPR, okay? You break a couple ribs while you do it. They can't sue you for breaking their ribs. Or they were a DNR, but how would you have known that, right? So you're protected by the Good Samaritan Act. Make sure you know that, okay? Advanced directives, and this is all very important. Advanced directives are legal documents where you are, in writing, putting your choices for end-of-life treatment. And you're naming someone to speak for you if you cannot speak for yourself with regard to healthcare decisions. So under an advanced directive, you have two things. You have your living will, and then you have your durable power of attorney for healthcare, or your durable medical power of attorney, or your healthcare surrogate, or your medical proxy. All of those things mean the same thing. You're naming someone to speak for you when you can't speak for yourself. Okay. Vulnerable people, we are obligated to care for people that are vulnerable. Older folks, elderly, children, babies, people in the hospital, people who are mentally ill, disabled people, etc. We're obligated by law, because we are licensed nurses, to either report something if we think that something's happening to a vulnerable individual, or make sure that they're safe. Okay. With ethics, we'll talk about death, right? So there's two types of death. Legal death, your heart is not beating, you're not breathing, you're dead. Brain death. Brain death is the irreversible cessation. In other words, all of the brain function has stopped, including the brain stem, which means you're not breathing on your own, okay? Your heart, everything. So that would be somebody who's, in not a vegetative state, but somebody who's in a coma and on a ventilator, okay? The most common reasons that this happens, usually cardiopulmonary arrest, traumatic brain injury, either subarachnoid or intracerebral hemorrhage. With these people, we the decision has to be made to remove them from life support, and that's made by the family, or if there's a living will, we would go by their wishes. This is a big cause for bioethical debates and ethical dilemmas, people on life support and whether to pull the plug or not pull the plug. And different states have different legal definitions of what brain dead means. So it can get really sticky, but just know that, the two definitions of death, it's either complete, you're dead, or brain dead. Okay. And that's just, I explained brain dead, which I already talked about. Prejudice, personal values, and how they go along with nursing. You have your own values and your own beliefs. If you dance naked in front of a full moon, good for you. You don't tell the client, okay? Ethnocentrism is the belief that your values, your culture is better than everyone else's, which we know is not true, okay? So make sure that you remain objective and open-minded, okay? Quality of life versus quantity, very complicated ethical issue, okay? Just know that, quality of life means, are you living the life to its fullest that you choose to live? For many people, quality of life overrides quantity of life. So for me, if something were to happen where I would be bedbound or a vegetable, I would rather be dead. So my quality of life is more important to me than the number of years that I'm here. So that, back to the brain death issue and somebody on life support and pulling the plug, that is the biggest ethical debate or ethical issue that goes on in this country, whether to keep them alive or not. Other ethical issues or dilemmas, organ transplant, right? What are the criteria for organ transplant? Somebody who refuses treatment. Do we withhold treatment, or do we stop treatment after we've already started it? And then one of the biggest things is euthanasia, which is physician-assisted suicide. It is legal in New Jersey, okay? But you have to be awake, alert, and oriented, and you have to have a terminal prognosis of 6 months or less to live. Bioethics committees. So you have them. Every hospital has a bioethics committee. It's doctors, it's nurses, social workers, chaplains, ministers, rabbis. It's a wide variety of different people who get together, usually on a regular basis. They also can be called together in an emergency if there's an ethical dilemma, and they give input to the decision-making process, and they act as advocates for clients, okay? Here I have listed the ANA, the American Nurses Association Code of Ethics. Please read it. The Code of Ethics from the ANA has been adopted by almost every board of nursing in the country. And this is the code of ethical values that we need to uphold as nurses. And then for nursing ethical principles, veracity, tell the truth. Autonomy, the patient gets to choose. Justice, treat everybody the same. Beneficence, do something good. Non-maleficence, do no harm. Fidelity, be trustworthy. Okay? And I think that we are done. Let me just do this question with you guys, even though you already saw it, but oh well. So ethical standards and laws set standards of practice. They tell us what we can and can't do, our limitations, our roles, and that type of thing. So that's why that's important. And that is the end of this chapter. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.